The role of media in shaping public opinion on police and the response of law enforcement. Chapter 1 My Introduction. As media use has grown substantially, it's become a powerful force in shaping how people understand crime and criminal justice system. Today, many Americans rely on various media platforms, both traditional sources like television and newspaper, and newer forms like social media, for news related to crime and law enforcement. However, these platforms don't just rely on information, they often influence how that information is framed. Unfortunately, this means that distorted information and biased portrayals of policing can be easily amplified, especially on social media where stories can spread rapidly without fact checking. This has real consequences for public trust in law enforcement, and this brings us to the key questions that guide this research. First, in what ways are distinct media sources, both traditional and social media, currently shaping the public's general opinion of the police? Secondly, what tools are police departments utilizing to counter narratives and improve public perception? For my research design, all of my sources were secondary sources materials from digital databases such as Western Oregon University, Pew Research Center, as well as some Salem um, police departments websites and other police department websites around the United States. The sources were mostly focused on events post 2020. However, some data was collected from early 2001 due to data showing an increase in social media use from more traditional outlets to receive news around the 2000s. The information was analyzed in a time when social media focused highly on crime and policing due to high profile incidences, such as around 2020 for Black Lives Matter movement. And consideration was given to studies that captured both positive and negative public perceptions for a well rounded review of the literature. The theoretical framework I have has focuses on five specific theories, starting with the cultivation theory, which suggests that repeated exposure to media, whether through TV or social platforms, gradually shapes what people believe to be true about the world, often reinforcing certain narratives. Building on that, framing theory explains how media doesn't just present information, it frames it in a specific way that can exaggerate or distort public beliefs. The two step flow theory adds another layer showing how opinion leaders like influencers, journalists, or public figures interpret and relay media messages to their followers, further shaping public opinion. When combined with the agenda setting theory, this becomes even more concerning as it shows how powerful actors can control not only how information is framed, but also what topics are given attention to, often driven by personal or political agendas. Finally, the spiral of silence theory explains why alternative viewpoints may go unheard. People may fear backlash or feel like it's pointless to speak up, allowing dominant narratives to go unchallenged. Together, these theories highlight the complex ways media can shape, amplify, and limit public understanding. My chapter 2 is my literature review. Starting with the history, policing in the United States can be traced back to the early 1700s with the formation of slave patrol, whose purpose was to capture and return escaped slaves, often using excessive force. This early system laid a foundation rooted in brutality and racial inequality. By the 19th century, formal police departments were beginning to be enforcing laws, and they were created, but unfortunately, some of the laws included those tied to Jim Crow segregation. As a result, police and minority relations were deeply strained. While laws have evolved, public concerns about police brutality remain, often amplified by media coverage. Media portrayals has also played a part of casting police officers as either villains or comedic figures in TVs and books. Within the current time, this is going to really focus more towards 2020 and on. The Black Lives Matter movement, through though present in earlier years, gained renewed national and global attention during COVID-19 pandemic, following the death of George Floyd at the hands of a police officer in 2020. The ongoing is the relationship between the community and law enforcement, which is constantly shifting, often influenced by high profile incidences in media coverage, such as the death of George Floyd. With the rise of social media, events involving police, regardless of where they occur, can quickly shape public opinion. Political affiliation also plays a major role, as Republicans tend to view police as essential for maintaining law and order, while Democrats are more likely to focus on issues of misconduct and social justice. Lowry's research also shows that prior to George Floyd's death, approval of police performance was relatively high across the political spectrum. However, following the incident, public trust declined, especially regarding the use of force, racial equity, and accountability. Next, I'll be talking about my media influence, starting with traditional media, which is put into two different groups, printed and broadcasted. Newspapers are one of the most traditional forms of media, which physically print, widely used in the US since the 1800s, though their origins date back even further. They are especially useful for reporting on local news and community issues. However, they are not always the most reliable source of information around policing. Research has shown that reporters can be biased, as journalists may shape stories or reflect their own viewpoints or cater to the preferences of their readership. Books and comics are often created for entertainment purposes, and while they may reflect real events or issues, they can oftentimes exaggerate or distort the truth for dramatic or narrative effect. Similar to the television and radio, though television and radio has their own issue of editorial bias, which can be seen in television news outlets and can be strongly influence how the public views policing, particularly through tone and framing. For example, Fox News, known for its conservative stance, often presents pro police narratives, sometimes emphasizing a victim's criminal record to shift focus away from the police's actions. In contrast, the New York Times, with a more liberal perspective, tends to highlight systematic issues in policing and humanize victims by focusing on their backgrounds, family life, and race. And these contrasting approaches can shape public opinion and interpretation of the same event in very different ways. The other influence for media is social media. Around 86% of US adults now get news from more digital platforms and technology. Currently, it is estimated that 5.22 billion people use social media found on digital platforms, making up approximately 63% of the global population. This is imperative to take into consideration, as 54% of the United States alone, over half, say that they use social media to receive news. And the majority of adults in the United States, 77%, are more likely to get news about crime specifically than any other topic, even besides the weather. This indicates that a majority of United States adults are receiving media to receive news around crime and criminal justice topics. Today's media landscape can include the spread of misinformation, fake news, contributing to confusion, mistrust along the public, and additionally, a phenomenon like cancel culture and antisocial behavior online can escalate tensions and, in some cases, even lead to politically criminal actions. By actively engaging with the community online, police departments can promote their community policing efforts, address misinformation, and maintain a positive public image. For example, the Salem Police Department in Oregon publishes their 2022-24 strategic plan online to provide transparency about their goals and improvements within the station. They also use platforms like Facebook to advertise community events such as Coffee with a Cop and share weekly shift commander reports that detail call data and officer activities. Additionally, the department issues media release on significant incidences, helping keep the community informed and foster trust through open communication. Within the community response, it's very divided. Again, it really just depends on the current political climate and recent events that trigger protests. Social media has become a powerful platform giving voice to members of marginalized communities who are previously underrepresented in public discussions to be able to communicate directly with departments. However, there is a lot of talk about defunding the police, which would mean that the money would go into more community programs that could potentially reduce crime through more rehabilitation techniques. While this is a pro for the community, it is a con for the police, as some of that money could be taken out of their training. Chapter 3 is my methodology. The study uses secondary data sources to examine how media coverage and police communication strategies influence public opinions and the narratives surrounding law enforcement. To narrow the research, keywords and phrases like social media and police perception, media and police, and media impact on opinions were used to select relevant and credible articles. The study analyzed various types of media, including traditional sources like newspaper and television, as well as digital platforms, and the collected literature was organized thematically to highlight key arguments and trends about how social media influences public perception of the police. One key limitation of the study is that police perception of law enforcement is constantly changing, influenced by external factors such as the high profile incidences and current political climate. These variables make it difficult to draw consistent conclusions over time. Chapter 4 is my results. For my results, my first result, impact of traditional media on public perception of police. We saw editorial bias and political leanings seen that both had an impact within the traditional media. Within social media, there was a global platform grown influencers for public opinion. There is a lot of use in social media as it can connect families and everything, but there is always that misinformation aspect that has to be taken into consideration, especially when someone receives their news from it. Third, police are utilizing media strategies to help try and communicate with the communities and have a community oriented policing kind of strategy. Whether or not it is working for them or beneficial is still yet to be seen, though a lot more engagement is occurring on these sites. Chapter 5 is my conclusion and discussion. Expected outcome. Media plays a significant role in influencing public perception. There was going to be a role that was known. The significant role of it for both traditional and social media could be seen from very early on. The history has contributed to a foundation of strained relationship. A lot of the history being against the marginalized communities is oftentimes brought up in incidences that happen today, so it was an expected outcome. An unexpected outcome was personalized community focused approaches, some officers going directly to people and to places that people are working to try and share information and connect with them on a more personal basis. Traditional media also contributing to shaping public perception, as traditional media is kind of outdated. However, it is still being used within older generations as a way to receive news. Recent events. Black Lives Matter, specifically around the time of the death of George Floyd, caused a major backlash that was felt across the nation in police stations. Even though it happened all the way in Minneapolis, it still affected the Salem police in Oregon, for example, as the Salem police was being protested against as well. Within the immigration concerns, ongoing concerns specifically after the election of President Trump was seen, but the Salem police chief, Trevor Womack, says he denies requests to work with ICE and is using social media to release these statements directly. Here's the revised theoretical framework within the 5 theories. Again, the cultivation theory can gradually shape viewers' beliefs. Framing theory, especially visible in newspapers, highlights how news is presented in ways that influence public opinion. The 2-step flow theory shows the role of trusted opinion leaders in passing along messages. The agenda setting theory reveals nearly all media have agendas, whether focusing attention on certain topics or influencing beliefs through emotion and sometimes exaggerated coverage. Lastly, spiral silence theory illustrates how individuals may stay silent when their views don't align with dominant narratives. Together, these theories demonstrate the powerful and lasting impact media has on shaping public perception. Chapter 6 is my recommendations, limitations, and suggestions. Recommendation: encourage media literacy. If people are able to spot the misinformation early on, then it wouldn't be shared as much. Encourage investigative journalism or label the pieces as opinion pieces if that's what they truly are, instead of passing it off as facts. Law enforcement also should be utilizing media platforms for trust and transparency even more than they already are, especially as we see continued use of it. Limitations: consistently evolving perceptions can cause it a difficult time trying to actually navigate what is working and what isn't. Narrowing the search of using secondary data can have prevented some of my information by not having direct sources. And my suggestion is to do a longitudinal study on public perception as well as analyze of media content regarding crime and criminal justice. Thank you.